What's up, guys? Today we are going to be doing a fresh out of the home theater review for SISU Road to Revenge on 4K UHD. This is going to be straight out of the theater, like I said, out of my home theater. So I didn't prepare for this except for a few notes here. So this is an unscripted review. But let's go over a few tech specs really quick here. This movie is rated R. It's rated hard R for some heavy violence. Runtime is 89 minutes. Aspect ratio is 239:1. This movie, I'm certain that it has a 4K DI. I don't know how it was shot, but the first SISU, I believe, was shot on the Sony Venice camera, which was also shot in 6K. I don't know if this was also shot in 6K as well with the Sony Venice cameras, even though this movie was distributed by Sony. Typically, Sony movies are shot using Sony cameras, so maybe this is, maybe this isn't. But if any of you guys know, then leave a comment down below. And the movie does have a Dolby Atmos mix. Now, before we get into the audio, if you do not know what the Dolby Atmos Object Viewer is, you can find what it is, what it does down below in this video's description, along with all of the gear that I'm using for this 4K review as well. Now, jumping over to the Atmos Viewer, this is essentially a 7.1.2 mix from the start of the movie to the end of the movie, and it really doesn't deviate from that. This is not a dynamic mix whatsoever. However, the first movie, if I'm not mistaken, did have a dynamic mix. I was going to review it, but I didn't think anybody was going to watch it because it didn't seem like it was a popular movie. This movie probably isn't going to get a lot of views either because I don't think it's that popular, but I enjoyed the first movie. I enjoyed this movie as well, so I figured, why not do this one? Unfortunately, unlike the first SISU's Atmos mix, this one, again, is pretty much static from start to finish, and at no point do we get any dynamic movement whatsoever, so it is just straight up locked 7.1.2. Now, keep in mind that I am using 6 overhead speakers, so if you are using 4 overhead speakers, then you will get 4 overheads, so it'll be 7.1.4 for you guys, but anything beyond 4, this sound is only going to come out of the top middle row, so keep that in mind. With that being said, let's check out a couple of the standout scenes that I thought were pretty good. So the first one is the planes that are flying overhead as they are attacking. I know his name's not Sisu, but he's attacking the main guy here. We got planes that are flying overhead. They're dropping bombs. Here is a ton of bass as the bombs are dropping. We get some planes that you can hear flying above your head as they move back and forth. Also, they're moving and panning through the lower channels as well. There is a bunch of car chases in this movie which have some okay movement in the lower channels. And all of the sound that you're seeing in the top speakers is basically just some light extension from what you're hearing in the lower channels. There is a shootout in this movie which happens on the train, which you'll hear bullets ricocheting and hitting different spots in the lower channels. It isn't too precise in its placement, but you do get some effects in those lower 7 channels. And of course, there is some overhead effects, such as some extra ambiance and reverberation, stuff like that, that do happen up top. Now, if your main criteria for having a great audio mix is a lot of bass, then this movie has a lot of bass. There's no denying that. So if that is your number one criteria, then I think you're going to be blown away by this mix, because everything from the explosions, the planes flying overhead, the bullets, the shootouts, especially that one big explosion, it'll drop pretty low. So LV bass heads out there, I think you'll be pretty happy. Is there a ton of infrasonics? I don't think there's a ton of infrasonics, but if you have some pretty good room gain, like I've got some pretty good room gain in here, that you'll get some fairly good extension as well. Now, as far as like surround placement and like clever movement, all that stuff, like the car is moving from back to front, front to back, side to side, maybe moving diagonal, planes flying overhead, stuff like that. You get a sensation of that happening in this movie, but it wasn't so clearly, precisely placed that you can hear that car going from that back left rear speaker clearly moving to the front left corner. So it isn't that obvious that you're hearing surround effects. I feel like they probably spent most of the budget with the digital effects in this movie, that they kind of skimped on the audio. I mean, you're still getting some okay movement, but nothing really stood out. So keep that in mind if you really want to get really precision discrete movement in your lower channels. This mix just doesn't have it. It really just sounds like a 7-channel mix that they just upmixed themselves. So audio-wise, I felt like the first movie was definitely much better than this one. This one is just okay. And dialogue-wise, the very few lines that are in this movie, actually there's none from the main protagonist. There's a few lines in this movie, and they were always easy to hear, so no issues with dialogue. Now, as far as video quality, I am almost certain that this was shot digitally, and they most likely did add some digital grain to this because you can see some very light digital grain. I did watch this on 4K on iTunes, so if you're watching this on something, or if you're watching this in the future on 4K Blu-ray or on a higher quality source, then the grain is probably going to be a bit more discernible. It's a little harder to tell on this digital stream just because, low bit rate, stuff like that. But on some of the brighter scenes, you can definitely tell that they have added some film emulation throughout. So you will see some very, very light grain. As far as the HDR, this does have the same color palette as the first film. So it does have a lot of muted colors, a lot of greens, browns, grays, stuff like that. So a lot of earthy tones, nothing that's going to really pop off of the screen except for some of those fiery explosions. But again, the color palette does lean more on the natural, if not slightly reserved, muted side. Black levels were good, solid throughout, especially for the darker scenes, so I didn't see any kind of detail being crushed, especially the scenes that took place on the train. You could see a ton of detail there and the woodwork in the train's interior, all the stuff with the soldiers in bed, stuff like that. Detail was never lost in the shadows. And for specular highlights, again, those explosions really did pop. The scenery, the landscape shots really looked fantastic. A lot of those wide shots looked great, especially for the daytime skyline shots. You can see some really nice highlight gradation as it goes from really bright to kind of mid-tone grays down to the really darker colors. So highlight detail was never clipped and shadow detail was never crushed. Now, I wouldn't say that the overall look of this movie is 4K crispy, but there's no doubt there is a ton of detail on board. So every time he's getting blown up, shot, stabbed, rolling on glass, you can see the amount of fine detail in all of those cuts, bruises, scars all over the main guy's body. It can get a little bit gross at times, the amount of detail that we can see in all those different prosthetics and stuff that they put on his body. So there is more than enough detail on hand. It's just that the film emulation will kind of keep it from having the 4K crispy status. But overall, I thought this was a great looking 4K transfer. This did come from Sony, and Sony is always known for putting out some great 4K transfers, and this, again, is no exception. Really great HDR, not over the top HDR, but still really satisfactory nonetheless, and then detail can be a little bit overboard at times. Not quite 4K crispy, but very, very close. I'm going to go with a 9.4 for video. Now, for audio, I was kind of disappointed in this, especially coming from the first movie, which did have a much more dynamic mix. This one is static from start to finish, 7.1.2. So if you are looking for some really good surround movement, such as the cars and the planes and all that stuff moving from side to side, front to back, just moving throughout your soundstage, you're not really going to get that. The surround precision movement is just not that great. It essentially just kind of sounded like a mediocre 5-channel mix to me. And then, of course, if you do love bass sounded great. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's a ton of bass in this movie, but as the overall package, I'm just going to go with a 6 for audio. Anyways, those are my thoughts on SISU Road to Revenge on 4K UHD streaming. Have you seen it? And what did you think of the movie overall? Did you prefer this one or did you prefer the first one? And what did you think of the audio quality? I didn't like it all that much, but leave your comment down below and let me know. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next video.